Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Kerrigan.
Welcome to Witch Talk. My name is Kerrigan, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Flowers, to talk about the left-hand path. It's a very, very interesting subject that I think that a lot of you would be interested in, at least curious about, because it's surrounded with a lot of controversy and also misunderstanding. So that's why we have an expert with us today to talk about that subject, which is very interesting. We're going to talk about him, about the book, and that's basically it. So I'm going to introduce him, and then we'll jump right in the interview. Here we go. Stephen Flowers studied Germanic and Celtic philosophy and religious history at the University of Texas at Austin and Göttingen in West Germany. He received his PhD in 1984 in Germanic languages and medieval studies, with a dissertation entitled Runes and Magic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest today on Witch Talk, Dr. Stephen Flowers. Hello, Dr. Flowers. Welcome to Witch Talk. How are you?
I am doing fine today.
Well, I'm very excited about this show because I know that this is a very controversial topic, and it's really not an easy one, certainly, to write about or to talk about, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, and that's why we have you here to talk about your book, The Lords of the Left-Hand Path. Now, first, I want to ask you, how did Stephen get involved in the occult? How did that happen?
Well, I had, when I was in high school, I was always, well, actually, let's go back. I was always fascinated with monsters, gods and monsters, as Dr. Pretorius said in Bride of Frankenstein. And Forrest J. Ackerman was my god when I was a kid, and Famous Monsters of Filmland was my Bible. And so I was always interested in things that were unusual, strange, and so forth. And as I matured, I got more interested in the sort of hidden parts of these things, that they weren't just fun movies and things like that. And so I wrote, for example, my senior paper in high school on the truth and the superstition and reality about the novel Dracula. And this was before McNally and Florescu had come out with their book.
Wow.
There were little bits and pieces out there about it. I hadn't, it was just a high school thing, but I was always fascinated with that sort of thing. And then I went to Europe immediately after high school, which was typical in the years 1971, 72 for kids in those days. Not so much now, I suppose, but then we did it. And and so and just things started to happen, and I said, well, I came home, and I was after that, and my aunt took me to a Baptist church in San Antonio, Texas, and they passed out a magazine telling us about the evils of Satanism and other things, and I said, hey, this looks like what I need to get into, you know, when I was just 18 years old. And so the Baptists converted me to Satanism, I will say that right now. But as an 18, 19-year-old. But and that's where it started, and went on from there. But it's been a long process of maturation, I would say.
Yes. And then you got involved in the Germanic studies, right? And
right.
all of that.
Yeah. Well, when I went to Europe, I went there to study German language and German things, and traveled in Germany and that sort of thing. And landed here after a stint at a junior college for a while. Came down to Austin and started studying here in Austin, and there was a lot of intellectual resources here concerning the Germanic tradition, very famous professors and so forth, and studying with them and so forth. And then on a wild goose chase, an occult wild goose chase for a Tibetan monk that some woman took me on, I heard the word runa, and I went to the library. I heard the word runa in the back of a hot, unair-conditioned, in the middle of the Texas summer, as hot as the devil's waistcoat, I must say, the way it is. But, it is bad. And it's bad today. But I'm in the air conditioning, thank goodness. But anyway, thank goodness for air conditioning.
Yes.
But I heard this word runa, and I said, what? I know what that is, but I went to the library, and books poured out to me, and that began the path for me as far as the Germanic world was concerned. And luckily, there were intellectual resources here, and not just books, but human beings, great learned human beings who guided me intellectually, and that's how it began, really, for me. And that's really the way that it's with me. The method I use, the method you see in Lords of the Left-Hand Path, and in other of my books, also written under my other name, Edred Thorson, really synthesize the intellectual, objective, scholarly, with a sense of the mysterious, without killing the mystery. Let's not kill the understanding of the mystery must be built upon the foundation of the rational.
Now, we're looking at the first edition of this book, which is a black cover, and with a very, I should say, I don't know, maybe medieval letters, lords. It's just very. I think it's. There's a lot of fonts with weird names, and some of them are Germanic actually, but there's kind of a medieval kind of letter, and then he has this pentagram on the with the circle.
That's the seal of Runa is the actual image you were seeing there, which is a synthesis. Like Gurdjieff, say, well, have a man diagram the universe, and have another man diagram, and we will then come to an understanding. And that image you see there, which I understand your audience can see, is a synthesis of the, or a combination of synthesis of the universe of Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino, is what you see there.
Ah. And we're going to talk about them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so you see that, and you see that there are whereas many images you see where the pentagram, inverse in this case, is touching the outer ring. That is considered the ring of nature, and that is we are bound to nature and or the material universe, or saying philosophically the material universe is what exists, or is all that exists, whereas the pentagram, as designed by Michael Aquino, has the pentagram withdrawn from the ring of nature, and says, therefore, that the consciousness is isolate from the natural universe. And what my glyph there says is that through the trapezoid, the pentagram remains away from the ring of nature, but is connected to it through the trapezoid. So you
It
see
touches
that.
it
So
through
this
the
is my
trapezoid, yes.
my diagram
Your
of
runa,
the
right?
universe. The Sila Runa. Where
Yes.
both of these things can be synthesized and
Yes.
simultaneously exist.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, then we have, and we're seeing it right now, another cover, which is this recent edition of Inner Traditions, Lords of the Left-Hand Path, which will be out, I think, today or tomorrow. I'm not sure, but it's
Well, that's
coming
news
out.
to me. But you
Yes,
know,
I
we're
think
always
so.
the last to know.
Didn't you know that?
No. But you know,
I think that it's coming out very soon. I don't know if it is today, so just tomorrow, but it's coming out very soon, and it's an absolutely gorgeous cover. But it doesn't really have the profound meaning of the first one, does it?
no. But publishers. I learned this I know many decades ago. Publishers design their covers. I used to work for Llewellyn Publications for a while, and Carl Weschke is a good friend of mine, and a great man. But you know, we'd sit and say, "Oh, we're designing these covers. Let's go for the kind of Dungeons and Dragons look today." You know, and so cover design—that's how books are sold. You know.
Yes, yes.
And cover
exactly.
design has to be according to their science, designed in a very specific way to communicate to a broad audience and so forth. My original cover design, which you referred to and have shown, is what I put, and that's like saying, you know, it's a little bit too much in your face kind of. Get back! This is scary stuff, you know. And they don't. Of course, they don't want to do that. But I must say, very strongly that I am very proud of the way that the present-day people at Inner Traditions, have stood up and brought this book out, because I've been trying to bring this book out for 20 years to the general public. I've written to, you know, agents, publishers, everyone in 1992-3 when I finished it said no. This was at the tail end of the Satanic Scare. This is why the book was written, to counter that back then. And they said, well, the book is good, it's solid, I can't find anything wrong with it, but we cannot do this in 1995.
Yes.
You know, we cannot do it because it doesn't say the two messages that are acceptable in 1995 are one. This whole left-hand path thing, Satanism, whatever, so forth, is dangerous and is very much something we must combat with all our heart and souls.
Yes.
Or, the second acceptable message would be, these people are a bunch of silly buffoons who cannot be taken seriously. They're just clowns.
Yeah.
And this book took neither of those approaches.
Yes,
it just wanted to explain precisely from within the rationale of these people, whether it's Hassani Sabah or Michael A. Aquino, what are we standing for? And I said, well, that's the truth. And America can't take the truth today.
It's just very interesting, because still today, Stephen, we still have this problem. We're still scared of the pointed inverted pentagram. You know, we're still scared about these things, and I don't understand why, really, because scare or fear is out of ignorance. If you have a book that actually explains it, why don't people read it? And don't be scared about it, because there's an explanation.
Today or tomorrow or sometime soon, you're telling me that there'll be a book out there that will finally say the truth. And what I'm really proud of is that both Church of Satan people and Temple of Set people and all, as far as contemporary practitioners, are both happy with the contents and I'm not a journalist.
That's
I'm
great.
not a journalist. I used to play one on at times, but I would not. I got out of that business a long time ago because I am a scholar and I want to present exactly what these people believe
Exactly.
from their perspective, and that's not easy sometimes
No.
because sometimes the people who are projecting, who are creating the thing, are too close to it to really be able to, in a sympathetic way, present to a general audience,
Absolutely,
a readership, what
Yeah.
these people are saying,
Absolutely.
and that when they see how I've represented them and say, it's good,
Yes, absolutely.
then I am satisfied. As opposed to a journalist where they want to say, I presented this person's group or this person to the public, and I like to hear them say, "You bastard, I'm gonna sue you." That's what a journalist wants to hear. A scholar wants to hear, thank you for
yes,
clarifying
yeah.
my point.
Exactly. I'm going to begin the analysis of this book with the first thing that we actually read on the book, which is it's actually a Latin sentence. It says, "Pro omnis dominis vitae sinistrae contra stupidus," and this is, I think. I'm not a my language descended from the Latin languages, but I'm not an expert on Latin. I don't know if this is the translation, but I think that it's for all the left hand against stupidity and ignorance.
Against the stupid people, against the stupid.
Against the stupid, yes.
So
So this
against
is
or the ignorant. Let's
Yes,
I think
yes.
it could be
Yes. So this is a statement. Now, this is certainly a book that is clarifying something, and very, very much, you do say so in Latin, and and we begin to kind of delve into the book. Now, what is this thing, the left-hand path? I mean, we grow up. Even in the occult, we study the occult, we dabble into it, we search for research, and we do find a lot of this dichotomy about the black and the white, the evil and the good, the left hand, the right hand. What is the difference between these two?
Well, very, very basically, and first, the terminology itself comes from India, where we see Dakshina Chara and Vama Marga, Vamachara, that's where the terminology comes from. It kind of comes into our world through theosophy, etc. But this idea of, the left hand was considered to be the feminine, the goddess, the other, if you will, from the male perspective. And so that's where the terminology comes from. It's not really a Western term to begin with, left-hand path, right-hand path. And when we go really way back to the Vedic sacrifice, etc., that you have the sun on your right hand and the pole, the north, the pole of the northern star on your left hand when you face east, making the sacrifice. And so this is where the terminology really comes from. And in the right hand of the path of the sun, the cycles of the sun, is saying, well, this is the natural path. This is the path of reincarnation. I'm speaking again from the Vedic, oldest Indian conceptions. This is the path of reincarnation through natural processes, which is from actually not that people will just reincarnate willy-nilly, but actually they will reincarnate in their descendants naturally. my grandson will be, if I'm dead, I'm grandfather, he will be reborn. I will be reborn in him. And this is a natural thing. And then the left-hand path, the polar path, is one in which that person, that initiate, will be separate from that process of natural, being bound by that natural process, and will become independent, ascending the pole, and then will either stay there or come back or whatever, depending upon their will, their assignment, their individual path, not bound by a natural law. You know.
Is that important? Is that important for human beings to actually walk that path, to have a conscious or to be conscious of something? Is this left-hand path something that would be? I mean, because we know that we have the right-hand path, and people sometimes, go through that path in search of enlightenment and blah blah blah. What do we have in the left-hand path?
What do we have in it?
What is there any process of transformation? Is there any process of, you know what I mean?
Yes. That's what it requires. The right-hand path requires no process of transformation, really. It requires only that you live, produce offspring, and die, and then you will be reincarnated in your descendants. That again, that's the ancient Indian perspective.
Yes.
So that's it. And then, but the right-hand path requires that the person develop themselves in an independent way so that they will survive death and be free, liberated from the bonds or the bondage of nature.
Yes.
See,
yes,
that they are free. Like in Buddhism, it's like the Bodhisattva.
Yes.
Who can incarnate, disincarnate at will, basically. That kind of thing. That there is a person, or in the again going to my field of expertise, you see that there are in the Norse world. I mean, this is not bounded in any way, shape, or form by Western concepts of good, evil, Christianity, the devil, and all that sort of thing. So that people, but the principles are present many places. So that you see that people will be naturally just reincarnated, for example, through their family, or they will become exemplary heroes whose names will live forever, and they will ascend to Valhalla. And there, when people enter it, they will see, there is that man, there is that person. That personality has ascended to a demigod state, and says thus identifiable for all eternity. See?
Now, can you explain to us what is explain to us the concept of Prince of Darkness, because there is this whole thing about the Prince of Darkness. There's this personification of the Prince of Darkness, but I think that's very simple. There's an explanation and a concept here. What is? Can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, I can see. Okay, let me speak from the perspective here, because I think it would be the most enlightening perspective, that of Michael Aquino who is the founder of the Temple of Set, and he a Prince of Darkness, Princeps. That is the first. That's like our same word is principle. First, that means first, the first form, not of darkness, but within darkness, and that is the Princeps, the first within darkness. Darkness is not really what people of the left-hand path worship or idealize, but rather the environment in which they exist. Think, and that's where we all exist, is their point of view, or my point of view. Think, for example, of these creatures, these fish creatures, which live in the depths of the terrestrial darkness, down in the Marianas Trench or whatever. Don't they produce appendages on their heads that provide their own light in darkness? They do.
Yeah.
And so if we are existing, which we do, we exist in darkness, and so we can either accept the darkness and submit to it, which is really the right-hand path, or we can say, I shall produce my own light in this darkness and thus be illuminated. And that's really the perspective or the approach that the practitioner of the left-hand path in 20th, 21st century America have, for the most part. That is that they are really seekers of the light in the sense of Lucifer.
Yes, yes. Now, I'm thinking about a series of things. I mean, I'm thinking about, processes of evolution. I'm thinking about, other things other than, the obvious, the Satanism and, all of the Luciferism and all of that. And I'm thinking about, well, doesn't that happen also in other... and are they considered to be left-hand path? For instance, witches, or, and I'm talking about British traditional witchcraft, where you do create your own light. You go through the mysteries, and you do have to. It's an experimental thing, so you do have to understand it by yourself. It's not really handed to you. I don't know. Is this considered to be left-hand path or not?
Well, it can be considered, but it depends on the person. We don't want to define someone else's path for them.
Yes.
And say, well, you're really left-hand path. You just don't know it. I mean, who wants to do that? I mean, that's not very, that's not productive or anyway.
Yeah, of course.
Meaningful.
Yeah.
So but as far as a scholar looking at it, I examine. In the book, I examined Gerald Gardner and so forth, and say, well, that you see these people who are practicing this sort of thing, and that they are creating their own universe essentially, and so in that sense they are practitioners of the left-hand path. But the degree to which someone would believe that, hey, I am trying to just get in tune with nature. If that's your attitude, then you are fundamentally right-hand path.
Yes.
If you are saying, and magic, the difference between, from, again, a scholarly perspective, and I did my dissertation on runes and magic, and I got into this idea of, from a scholarly perspective, and some scholars or half scholars are a bunch of idiots, I will agree, but half of them really will open your eyes if you get into that. The true occult literature, which I've told many people, is to be found not in your local occult bookstore, but in your local, and many times it is very local, people still know it, in your local academic library, your university library. That's where you're going to find things. Nobody reads this stuff. It is really arcane. And if you get into that, you'll see that, well, what we're really talking about is that right-hand path things are religion, is things which they conform, learn to, and develop techniques for a conforming with nature or with the orthodox dogma, etc. And when you become one with that, then you are saved, you are enlightened, you are liberated, whatever. You've become one with this greater power. And the other, magic says, I want to say that I have developed myself into an independent being, and I am able to assert that, contrary to the prevailing natural order, and that is what I am trying to do. See?
Now, the thing that I'm just thinking with you. Okay, so I'm just we're just thinking together. The left-hand path, then, it's not necessarily evil, because this is what people think. You know, people think,
well,
oh,
it's evil.
You know.
It's evil in the sense that, you know, back in the early '90s here in Texas, we had a guy, you know, this David Koresh guy down in Waco, right? And it was like, well, around the old water cooler there in offices around the state, people would say, well, that guy, he deserved to get burned. He was weird. He was out of touch. He was weird. He wasn't normal. He deserved to die. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, at that moment I said, the Middle Ages are alive and well in this present moment in time. Because all you have to do is demonize a person sufficiently or properly, and the standard issue, you know, humanoid will respond as they did in 1300.
It's exactly the same
in
impulse.
2000. They will still respond that way.
It's exactly the same.
So there's no. So the answer to the question, is it evil? Of course, it's not evil, but the idea of normal, and that's where we get into this antinomian.
Yes.
Which nomos means law, but it also could be jiggled a little bit and say, well, it's the normal. You know.
Yes.
And anything that's other than normal is evil. Which is, of course, not true, but that's the right-hand path perspective, whether you're talking secularly or religiously or magically. People who are saying, what is good is what is about conformity to your neighbor's values, whatever they are. That's my ambition in life, is to conform to what the other guy says I should be doing, as opposed to the left-hand path. And that's where, for example, people like Anton LaVey would rail against Wiccans and witches and so forth, because he would say they play the devil's game but won't take the devil's name. Okay?
Yes.
So they're hypocrites. So they're dressing in black. They're at odds with the norm. But when I say, yeah, that's what I'm doing, that's what I'm all about, and this is what this philosophy is saying, they'd say, get away from me, LaVey, you are an evil, bad man, you know?
It's true, yes, yeah.
Yeah, but of course we have the more profound differences between them. But, you know, that still that was one of his, you know, favorite sayings or whatever.
Yes. Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you is, it's about, you know, when we talked about the Hellenic left-hand path, and we're going to go through, you know, all of this research and where does it come from, and you go through all of these things on your book. I mean, you go through the left-hand path, the Eastern traditions, and then you go into the roots of the Western traditions, and you know, you just go through all of that. We don't have time to actually go through all of the things, but we can actually go through some of the major points. I think that it would be interesting. One of them is you have, on the roots of the Western tradition, you have something that is called Prometheus and Pandora. And then you say, you know, the origins of evil and its transformative effects on humanity. Now, how important is this, how significant is this Prometheus myth related to the origin of the evil in humanity? Well, we see that because it's most profound, because we can take it totally out of the Christian pagan context and say, here's Western civilization
as we idealize it and say this is the Greek world, and here we see a figure wherein we have a law-giving, commanding God in the form of Zeus, who says this is the way things should be. And then we have a rebel against him who, and again, completely out of biblical context, says, I'm going to go to mankind and I am going to provide this light, this fire, this divine fire. And then and I'm going to provide it to him in an act of rebellion. God, Zeus punishes Prometheus and all of that for defying his will to prevent man from getting this. And of course, we see that later, or contemporaneously, or whatever, historically, we see that Gnostics reinterpret or interpret the Edenic myth in the same terms, where we see that the serpent is the friend of man, and is, and of course, Kabbalistically, which I think I point out, the word Messiah and the word Neshech, for the serpent are Kabbalistically equivalent. That's an old thing Colin Wilson talked about and everybody knows about. Yeah. So that this is the friend of mankind as opposed to a law-giving kind of collectivizing figure in the form of Yahweh or Zeus or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we see that Prometheus or the serpent is on the side of mankind. And of course, where we see the huge, enormous difference between the pagan tradition and the Judeo-Christian one is that historically Zeus is caused, we see this in Greek dramas and so forth, is caused to forgive Prometheus ultimately and admit that Prometheus was right.
Yes.
That giving the fire of the divine fire to mankind was an improvement, was the wise choice, and does not just simply stand on his authority to say, I told you not to do it, you did it, and therefore you're evil, case closed. But rather saw that mankind, look what mankind has done with this fire. Prometheus, you were actually right. Of course, this is actually a process within the Greek world, but again, in the Greek pagan world, where you see that attitudes can evolve when you're in a traditional sort of mythic framework, as opposed to a dogmatic framework, wherein written words say, well, we cannot say that is ever good, because it's just the way it is.
Now, the thing is that we have to really jump a lot of stuff that I would love to talk to you about, but we don't have time to do it. But in the first millennium, which is not in the first millennium per se, but in your book, when you talk about the first millennium, you ask a question, and I'm going to ask you a question which is very interesting because it really is something very important. Was Jesus a Lord of the left-hand path?
Oh, you hit on the hot spot in the whole book there. And I think that there's a book by a scholar. He's not a book which most people pass over because they think, well, this is a ridiculous book. Come on. It's called Jesus the Magician by Morton Smith.
Yes.
He was a University of Chicago scholar, and he looks at this whole, who was Jesus really? Even within the Gospels, without it, whatever, objectively looking at this figure as reflected in everything we have. And he says, well, he's a magician. Right? He makes his living going from town to town. Give us this day our daily bread. That is, just give us what we need for today through our miracle working. And we heal the sick, we make the blind see, etc., and so forth. And so how was he initiated? Well, you see in the magical papyri, there are rituals which are described wherein the the initiate is wrapped up in a falcon or some kind of, these are Egyptian things, descend on the initiate and peck him or hit him and say, "This is my son." You know, he's a son of God. And it reflects exactly the baptism scene where he says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." So he is a magician, according to Morton Smith. And so then what does he do? Well, he contradicts the law. Right?
Exactly.
He is antinomian in the most literal sense. He says, the Jewish law says, this is an adulteress, stone her to death. He comes and says, let him who is without sin cast the first stone. And they're just looking at each other like, you know. Well, the law says, well, but this is something else.
Yeah.
Right? I'm bringing something new to you. And of course, if we look at this, and I don't know whether I have this in the book or not. Again, I wrote this book over 20 years ago, so it's just, you know, I've just reviewed it a little bit here in the recent past, but it was something that was really 1992-3 for me.
Yes.
So I might be bringing new things to bear here. But if we look at the Jesus story, and we say, why do those three wise men come to him? Where do they come from? They come from the East, from Iran, from the Persian world. What is that all about? That is about bringing a golden mean to things. That is bringing the middle ground to things. If a people or a person is lacking in one thing, you need to bring him the opposite thing to balance him. If a people are overburdened with law, they need, for example, love to balance that. That was his message, right? And
yes,
so
exactly.
that is what we see. It says, this is against the law. This is against the norm of the prevailing society. So essentially, Jesus in the middle of the Jews in the first century of our era is not unlike, you know, Anton LaVey, you know, or Michael Aquino. I mean, these are people who they're bringing you ideas and things that you're not ready for, and you don't want to hear. And in fact, you think even saying them are punishable. If we could kill you, we would, you know. And in those days, they could, so they did.
Yes.
You know.
No.
So I think that in that sense, he was against the prevailing norm, and therefore it can be considered exactly that. As in back in the 60s and 70s, I remember people always saying, Jesus was a witch, you know.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, so, you know, in that sense.
Yeah. So now we're talking about the path of Satan. And by the way, can you just, you know, for those who don't know where this word come from, can you talk a little bit more about where the Satan word come from? Right.
Well, the word Satan, or in Arabic shaitan, comes from is a Semitic word, and it means literally the opponent or the adversary. And if we look back into the book of Job, for example, an Old Testament book, we see that that Satan and Yahweh are sitting there, kind of just sitting back, you know, throwing back a few brewskis and saying, "Hey, who's your best guy down there? I got Job. I bet I can mess that dude up." And he says, "No, you can't. Job's a cool guy. He's one of my men." And he says, "Do your best, buddy." Because in the Jewish tradition, the opponent was just your prosecuting attorney. He was just prosecuting you before God. He was not the ultimate evil. Whereas Christianity, a little, you know, later evolution, a lot of these questions, a lot of these mysteries of the Bible are answered historically, because the Bible, as we've been so, you know, led to believe, is like one unified truth, is actually a historical hodgepodge of a lot of different things. And we only get from Iran, from Persia, this idea of of evil versus good, and it's not necessarily a negative thing, but that was what really formed Judaism later. That's where the Jews or Christians eventually got the idea of the resurrection of the dead and all sorts of things. Were actually Iranian ideas that were imbued into Judaism during the Babylonian captivity. And so in the Jewish tradition, the opponent is really just part of God's team. He's not somebody who's like an evil adversary of God and humanity and so forth. That's like a Persian idea. And so so that's where we get into misunderstandings about the idea of who Satan was historically. But if we just look at it as then saying, well, this is the evil one or the other one, then we start to get into later conceptions of it.
Now, another book that I have to mention this book. I don't know if you know it or not, but this is a book that was written by John A. DeVito, and I came across it by chance, and it's very interesting. It's called The Devil's Apocrypha. Do you know this book?
No.
There is two sides of every story. Now, this is the story of everything that happened, and we're talking about, the devil that, or the Lucifer, the angel that it's, banished from, the sky, and comes down, and So this is the story. This is basically a book that tells you the story on the other side. So this is what actually happened. According to Lucifer, and I was not banished. This is not what happened. Let me tell you the story. So it's a very interesting story. It's told in, apparently, they say that it's actually, I don't know if it is fictitious or not, but I think that they think that they are, But it's just very interesting. It's a very interesting book if people are interested in very interesting and kind of unexpected sides of other sides of the story, because there's always another side of the story other than the one that
that's the other side we're talking about. Wherein you say, like Yahweh is saying in the Genesis, here we have these two trees, one of life, one of knowledge, and these are the two things that make man divine, or make anything divine. If you have knowledge and immortality, that is life, eternal, and knowledge, unlimited, you are a god. And he says it in the Bible. He says, they've eaten of the tree of knowledge. We must eject them, lest they eat of the tree of life and become like us, like gods.
Yes.
And that's what we can't have.
Yeah,
and that's what the serpent is saying to Eve. He said, "Come on, eat this, and you will, And again, we go back to Jesus. He says, Jesus, you made this miracle." He says, "These things and yet greater things shall ye do, if you but believe in me." He was not speaking, as we see in the this thing Morton Smith wrote, says all these magical utterances. I am the truth. I am the light. I am the way. These things, we look in the Greek magical papyri, which are not Christian.
Not at
they
all,
are pagan things, and they have these I am statements.
Yeah.
For when the magician rises up into the divine state in order to work magic, they say, I am the truth, I am the light, I am the Son of God, I am the Son of a God.
Yes.
And I am powerful, and I can do this thing now. See me in an hour, maybe not, but right now I'm on fire. right?
It's just amazing, to look at these things, and you think, there's this whole information that really not, one of the things I was very not disappointed, but I was it was that you actually say, and it makes absolutely sense. It's the truth. It's that in the Path of Satan, which is basically the chapter 5, you talk about the left-hand path in the Western Middle Ages. And there was not too much action,
No.
in the Middle Ages.
Well,
there wasn't the right-hand
that time
path.
period is dominated by, that's where
Yes.
the stultification of the law of conformity, etc.,
Yes,
is probably
yes.
at its strongest. So those people who just made a peep were out of the norm, were enormous heroes and people who were really trying to break through. But of course the cultural, it's like saying, well, how would you like to have tried to be a rebel in the 50s versus the 60s or 70s? Well, it's harder in the 50s, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you get more beat down, in the
Absolutely,
50s than
yeah.
you are in the 70s.
Yes, absolutely. Now,
Or nowadays, that's that's like the norm. So, you got anything else for me? You're boring.
yes, yeah. Now, the other thing is that the Satanism, as as it is. I mean, Satanism, or the coined name of Satanism, was really not, it was like really not mentioned until the 16th century and 17th centuries, which is very interesting also because, I thought, and we're going to talk a little bit about France and the French, but it's very interesting, this thing that came from the Protestant and the Catholic. They were actually the ones who coined it and said, this is Satanism. And then you have the witch craze, obviously, and we live in Salem, Massachusetts, and it's the center of. We had an episode in 1692.
Well, that's
we
what
had
I
an
think. I
episode.
finished. If you'll notice, I don't know if the Inner Traditions had it there, but they actually finished intentionally at a Temple of Set conclave. Penned the part of the preface there in Salem, Massachusetts.
Yes.
In 2000. In 2000. Well, when was it? On the 300th anniversary of the witch trials in Salem.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Puritanism and all that, but it's very interesting. Now,
Just great.
talking about Christian heretics, we know that even the priesthood of the Roman Catholic priesthood and of other sects of the church were involved actually with what you would call Satanism,
Sure.
behind the curtains. And this is, and then you have all of those, the Christian heretics that,
Sure.
they are Christian, but they are considered to be heretics by the right-hand sect of the path. Now, the Cathars and all of that.
Right.
Why do you think that these men? I mean, we're talking about bishops and and high clergymen
Popes.
within the.
I mean,
yes,
when
popes. Exactly.
people are watching this, if anybody's watching, I haven't been watching this too much, but on television, this Borgia's series on cable television.
Yes.
Alexander the Sixth. I mean, this idea of the bad popes, in the Renaissance. When he was declared pope, he put up banners that said, whoever was before him said, represented God. Alexander the Sixth is God. and he was going on Renaissance, Pico della Mirandola's theories about the divinity. That's why they call Michelangelo the divine, that men could become gods. This was something that was part of this sort of. There were no more than 80 men involved in this whole thing in Florence and in that whole region, who really grasped this concept in the Renaissance, which has stamped our civilization since. But those people really, took those things to heart, that human being is an indeterminate being, and he can become what he wills, including a god.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Alexander the Sixth, Pope, it absorbed these ideas and actually declared them in public, so that you will see that they are not really, from the Catholic perspective, they're considered evil, because you're saying you're God, and they say, as he said, these things and yet greater things shall you do.
It's
I am,
just
yes,
great.
I am Christ. I am like Christ. I am the equivalent of Christ. And of course, the Pope is called the Vicar of Christ, the representative of Christ. But say, no, I'm just not a representative. I am God.
Yes.
And that was the bold assertion of the human spirit. And we look at the Italian Renaissance, we say, that's a great time. Look at all that stuff they produced, and nobody is without admiration for it. But what was it really? It was a rebirth of paganism. It was a rebirth of Hermeticism and of ideas totally contrary to Orthodox medievalism,
Yes.
which is the message that you are nothing, God or Christ is everything, and you must submit to these things and not get out of your place as a lowly sinner human being.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So in that sense, we admire that in the modern world without really fully understanding what was really going on there.
Now, I have to agree that this is you have in the Path of Satan, which is the part of the book that is called the Path of Satan. You have the witch craze. And you talk about all of this, and then you have a little bit in the beginning. You have Anton LaVey again with. What a charismatic man, huh? We have another line from Anton LaVey who says, that on the ninth Satanic Statements reads, Satan is the best friend of the church has ever had. He has kept them in business all these years.
Right.
And it's really true. I mean, if you think about it, it's absolutely true. But the thing that I wanted to go with, it's the index of superstitions and pagan practices.
Right.
Which I think it's so curious. I mean, it's just amazing. You have listed all of the things that they... Can you talk a little bit about this?
Right. Well, those are...
medieval...
Unfortunately, there was a whole book attached to that. That's like the table of contents to a book that has become lost. But it indicates all of the practices that the pagans were doing that need to be opposed, that are unchristian, that need to be condemned, etc. And there's there's 30 of them or something like that, 30 or 40.
30, yes.
30. So, and they give us sort of a litany of things that these people, and no, in the Middle Ages or whenever, people don't make laws against, whether it's spitting on the sidewalk in 1910 or whatever, people don't make laws against things that aren't happening.
Yes,
people make laws against things that are happening and they want to stop.
Yes.
And so we can be assured that all of these things that they list in here were being done by people to a level and degree that was bothering the authorities.
Yes.
And so we get a catalog of practices that, making a need fire, making a fire with friction, not from, but creating fire where no fire existed before. That kind of thing. Oh, that's like evil. That's bad. Because of course that was part of pagan practice about creating a new fire for religious purposes. So that whole section is really a kind of
it's
a
a pity
catalog
that we don't have the book, isn't it? Is it pity that we don't have the book?
Yes, because they would have gone into a lot of detail on
oh, absolutely.
who did what, where, and why this needs to end.
On idols made of cloth.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to know that. On idols made of dough.
Well, those are like,
whole...
where they bake things,
It's just
cookies
amazing.
and things like
Yeah.
that are, then consumed like almost Eucharist-like, where they make images of gods and then consume. The Christians didn't invent the idea of the Eucharist, that is, creating images, sanctifying them, and then consuming them in order to consume the divine essence. That's all the Eucharist is. It's just
It's
a
very
magical
shamanic,
act.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. Just
Yeah,
bringing
it's very-
down the God into the substance,
Yes.
imbuing it in there, and then consuming it. The
Oh, but
only
we have-
Christian
we-
part is where you have a priest that has to do it. You can't do it. You
Yeah.
have to have the official dude, who's like got the badge that says he's okay to do it. That's what you
Exactly.
need. And you need to
Yeah.
come in this building to get it done.
Yes,
It's a monopoly on the divine.
Exactly, yeah. Now, you talk about in the Lucifer Unbound, you talk about the old Nick. There's a few people who really actually talk about this also. Can you tell us who was old Nick?
Old Nick.
Yes.
Well, just a name for the devil,
Yes.
isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sometimes people think, well, yes, that was it, but that was also connected with the horn god, or more on a more pagan perspective of things. But you do say that.
Well,
this
you
is-
have
this
like,
is-
when they say Nick, Saint Nicholas.
Nick.
I mean,
Yes,
it's like,
and
hey,
old
it's
Nick,
not
yeah.
connected. Just get somehow connected to what we call, Santa Claus, which if you look at him, you go, this guy Santa Claus doesn't seem to be a Christian. He's like, dressed all in red. He comes down from the North Pole with a team of reindeer dispensing gifts at the Yuletide. I don't see the Christ there.
No.
So I mean, there's a lot of that where there's this folkloristic. What people really believe, just like today, where you
that's
see
true.
that where you see these kind of biblical fanatics railing against Christmas or Christmas practices, and they say this is pagan, the Christmas tree and Santa Claus. Put the Christ back in Christmas. Get rid of that Santa Claus guy. They recognize that all of this, but when push comes to shove, and you really go out there and say, well, which one are you going to give up? I say, I'll give up Christ. I mean,
For the
average guy,
presents.
you'll say, give me Santa. It's like,
Yes,
give
yeah.
me Barabbas. Give me Santa.
Exactly.
Well, I want Santa. Santa is my man. I mean, Santa is, does something for me, just like Barabbas did. That in their world, in those, 2,000 years separating these events, but you see that that's what's close to the people, and the other is like, well, it's theoretically maybe the preacher says that's the right way, but I just don't get it. I just don't understand it. I just don't live it. It's not close to me, and so that's where you see these traditions which were railed against for centuries, Christmas trees, all these pagan things about Christmas or Easter or whatever, those are the things that persist, and
Still
the things
today.
that are
Yeah,
orthodox and theologically, those are things that people still 2,000 or 1,500 or 1,000, depending on where your people come from and when they were converted or Christianized nominally, still don't get. They still are scratching their head and saying, well, it just doesn't make sense to me. Whereas, Santa Claus, that makes sense to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's jump into the 1700s and let's talk about the Hellfire Club.
Mm-hmm.
And what was exactly this club, and how important was it?
Well, I think it was important when we see the idea of Lucifer being the light bearer, and we see the historical period in Western history called the Enlightenment, which is mostly in the 1700s, and which our United States Constitution and Declaration of Independence are monuments to the Enlightenment, as is the layout and everything about Washington, D.C., etc., is all an expression of this idea of the Enlightenment, to bring the light. And this is, of course, connected to a large extent to the symbolism of Freemasonry, which says the light, the universal light, is God. It's not bound to any individual, tradition, whatever, culture, etc. It's a universal light. All men are brothers within this light, etc. But those things are all from the perspective of whether you're an Orthodox Muslim fanatic or a Christian fanatic or whatever kind of fanatic you want to bring on the stage. Is like, oh, we don't want to do that. We don't want that. That's bad. Ooh. But these people are saying, well, this is the idea that we're trying to bring across, this universal presence of light. And so this is where the idea of the Enlightenment, and these Hellfire people were saying, we're English gentlemen, but really we want to be free of all of the bonds and of what people say we ought to be doing, as gentlemen, etc. Let's see what the universal light brings to us, and that's where people like Benjamin Franklin were involved with Hellfire and so forth and so on. But they were precursors or brethren spirits with people like Anton LaVey, in the sense that they were saying, like, our society is so bound by norms. We got to wear this kind of powdered wig and these kind of stockings and this kind of crap all the time. That's bad. We want to be free of all of these bonds as enlightened beings. And so that's where the imagery of the hellfire comes in. Not that they believed in hellfire or the devil or anything like that, in the sense that, again, I think that they're brethren spirits with people like Anton LaVey, who are really saying, we're using this just to say, this is illegitimate. This is illegitimate imagery. And we're going to, thumb our nose at the whole thing, and make it fun. Again, if you look at the thing, if you look at the spirit of Anton LaVey, as I think I tried to, convey, and maybe not, because I was quite philosophical, try to take it absolutely seriously, but I think there's just this great spirit on his part of play and fun and poking fun and being serious, but at the same time having a good time doing it.
It's very interesting. Yeah. A very famous witch in England actually had a challenge that Anton LaVey did to her, and he challenged her. He said, she doesn't really remember what it was, but he challenged her. So he was a poker. He was like, and she said, well, come over England, and we'll see. So she actually invited him. He never went. But she was a witch. She's a witch.
He's probably, having a nude witch's review that night.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Now, you talk a little bit about, when you talk about the occult revival, you talk a little bit about Austin Osman Spare and the lover of the self. How important is this man to this whole thing? I mean, is he considered a lord of the left-hand path?
Oh, I don't really think so. Lord of left-hand path. He's an enigmatic character because he's so individualistic. Yeah. And Crowley said, he's a brother of left-hand path and all that sort of thing. And because he just totally within himself and absorbed into himself and all of that. But I think that his writings and his theories and so forth are too imprecise, let's say, to say, oh, well, he's this or he's that, and to pin him down. A lot of people you can do that and just say, well, according to the criteria, this is true or not. But in his case, I think he's has to be considered a special case. And I think one thing, for example, is a lot of his techniques, magical techniques, were things that he was atavistically recovering from. I mean, we look into Icelandic magic, for example, some of his sigilization techniques and so forth, which I'm sure he had no knowledge of Icelandic magic, of the 1700s. But this was exactly what these people were doing, precisely, exactly that, what he was talking about. So I think that he had this tremendous ability to intuit practices and so forth. And just because someone is a individualist or a recluse or someone who is so idiosyncratic that their techniques seem to be unique, doesn't necessarily mean that they, are antinomian, or that they are doing things that are saying, I'm doing this against the norm, etc. So that's why I qualify in that way.
Now, you talk also about the modern witchcraft and the left-hand path. We talked a little bit about it in the beginning, and you do say, well, there are several antinomian aspects of Wicca. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I think that, like we go back to Anton LaVey's statement, you take the devil's name. In other words, you look like the devil.
Yes.
People say witches are bad, witches are weird, witches are evil, and you identify with that, and so forth, and yet you say, well, but really I'm just totally good. And so it's like, well, you're like messing with me here, Southern Baptist boy, says, you're confusing me. You're saying I'm a witch, but I'm good. Well, haven't you ever heard of Glinda? Good witch of the north? I mean, come on. But really, and of course we know that going back to Old English, where the word witcha and witcha and so forth comes from, that this is just, sorcerer. It's not anything evil implied there. It's just about magic and about doing things that are the healing or harming or doing magical techniques for whatever purpose, without regard to any kind of. It's like human beings. We can do good or we can do evil without using magic, and those things will be determined. The goodness or badness of it will be determined by what is done, not the technique by which you do it.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, well, I hit him in the head with a hammer, or I put a curse on him, and he died. Well, which one? Well, that one where you did the curse on him, that's really evil. When you hit him in the head with a hammer, well, not so much. It's like you killed him either way. That's the point we're trying to get at here. Determining whether it's a good or bad thing. So in traditional times, pre-Christian, it's only with the idea, again, that magic, the assertion through a spiritual technique of the individual will, is contrary to divine law, which should be conformity only to divine law, and therefore it is a worse crime. That's only in that context does it make sense that you say, well, like, witchcraft is worse than hitting the guy in the head with a hammer. It's because you are using spiritual technology contrary to, quote, divine law.
Exactly.
That makes it worse.
Yeah.
It's kind of like hate crimes. It's like, well, it wasn't that you just killed the guy. It was like what you were thinking when you did it that we want to extra punish you. Punish you in an extra fashion for. It's like traditionally, it's like, well, if you did it, well, no matter how you did it, that's what we're going to judge you on, or determine the goodness or badness of the action is not. But it's only when you see that there's this idea that there's a spiritual technology that the church has a monopoly on, that you as a layperson should have no access to, and you are doing it contrary to the idea of the church. That's where you're a terrible heretic, witch, bad person, and are worse, much worse than somebody who's going to do these same things in a physical, direct way. And within a pagan context, it's like not how you did it, but what you did, not how you did it. So that's the big difference there, I think, between the pagan world and the Christian world, where these things become more of a spiritual crime or an intellectual crime, thought crime, rather than a crime pure and simple.
Now, in chapter 9, you talk about Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, which is different from the set. And the other, what is it called? The Michael A. Aquino.
Temple of Set. Yeah,
Temple of Set. Yes, very different. And how important is Anton LaVey for this? I mean, on Satanism, obviously. Everybody knows he's very important. He's the he's the
guy. You see a rock concert with guys holding up two fingers. They're not all from the University of Texas, let me tell you. That's his influence. Which is really just an Italian cuckold thing, and he kind of signed of the horns, and he brought that all, out. So I mean, if you go on just the pop culture level of something as, silly or trivial as that.
It's there.
Anton LaVey is an incredibly interesting man, and I wish somebody, I can't do it because I'm just not in a position to do it, but somebody needs to write a true and absolute biography of this man.
Well, let me just
perspective.
Let me just tell you that you do a great job on it.
Well, but I mean,
you know what I mean?
As far as,
it's just
very
good.
Everybody's happy. Most, including the present high priest of the Church of Satan.
It's just really good.
Likes the book and everything, so I'm happy with that, as I said before. But he is important. I mean, because without him there would be no, I suppose, Michael Aquino, because Aquino joined the Church of Satan and sort of, and as I'm a good friend of Michael Aquino's. And he said to me, that Anton was just, a mentor, a teacher, and a well-respected person, in his life. And so there's no debate about the fact that the Temple of Set grew out of the Church of Satan. It's kind of like where you see like Plato and Aristotle, or Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. You have these masters, and then a student. Their best student sort of goes out and does their own thing, and that's what
Aquino actually did. Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, and I mean, as I've said to other people that are friends of mine also, that and I, stick loyally with Michael Aquino as my friend and initiator. And others stick with Anton LaVey as theirs, and we are both, that this man and I are both friends. I say, well, man, we're just not as good a Satanist as Michael Aquino, because, I mean, he rebelled against his master, right?
Exactly.
Just like Lucifer rebelled against his.
Exactly.
But we don't want to, we stick with our guys, so, we're not really, the same, cut out of the same cloth. That's part of the myth of the whole thing.
Now, tell me a little bit more about the difference between the Church of Satan and Michael Aquino. What did Michael actually brought from the Church of Satan to, and involved? I'm sure that it's a more refined and a different perspective. A different perspective.
Yeah, different. I wouldn't say more refined or whatever. Even though I am a member of the Temple of Set, and I won't. I don't hide that, but I try to be as objective. I'm a great admirer of Anton LaVey's and see there's just two different things. It's not that one is really like, well, this was like a basic thing, and then this one is different. It's like the difference, if we go back to ancient Greece and we see there's a difference between these two schools of Epicureanism and Stoicism, where you have Epicureans who say the natural universe is all that exists. And that is all I'm saying, that this is what exists. There is no reality beyond that. That is my principled position, and that is that of Anton LaVey, who says the natural world is all that exists. And the people who say, oh, there's a spiritual world and a world beyond, it's all so much better, that they are lying to you. That's what Christianity is saying to you. Just sacrifice yourself today for glories beyond. So that's somebody who's conning you.
Yeah.
And so that's LaVey's perspective, whereas Michael Aquino is of the more Platonic idea that there is a greater, higher world, a world of principle beyond this world, of which our world is a reflection, and that the chief idea is that there is a principle of isolate consciousness. He calls it isolate intelligence, I sometimes call it, which says you have an intelligence, Kerrigan, you have one, I have one, each one of the listeners now listening and watching have one. Where did that come from? Where is the princeps, the principle, the first form, from which all of our individual examples of this thing came? That is the prince of darkness. That is the principle of isolate intelligence. And that is the prince of darkness. That is what and Michael Aquino is Temple of Set, but there are other myths and so forth. We just say we'll just pick this one. Set, an Egyptian thinks is probably the oldest example that he can see.
Yes.
But it's not that it's a Neo-Egyptian thing.
No, not at all. No,
so anyway, that's the principal differences that you see. That there's one that says that there's a higher transcendental principle from which we are derived. Michael Aquino. The other, Anton LaVey, says the natural world and all of our individual predilections, tastes, and so forth is a part of just this natural world and ring, just like, one dog might like kibbles and bits and another one might like pedigree. That's just kind of the way we are as human beings with our tastes and our differences, which are infinite, but nevertheless there's nothing, from beyond nature that is conditioning those tastes.
Now, if you could summarize, and I didn't know, let me just say this, the Temple of Set actually has a degree system. I didn't know this. And it's absolutely amazing. It has 4 degrees. And 6
degrees.
6 degrees, yes, that's it. And then you go in detail, actually, and you kind of talk about it, and you just go from one, the adept, and you just kind of go through them, and it's very informative. I didn't even know that they had degrees at all. I think that you do. Michael should be very, very happy with what you wrote, because it's so informative and so well done. I think, in my opinion, it's very. Even there's something here called the Black Magical Universe, Sethian Cosmology. You actually go through it the cosmology and everything. I mean, it's just a very informative and wonderful reading, because you really have an idea. I mean, obviously, I know that everything is not here, but the book itself and this part especially, it's very informative and very, and maybe because you're connected with it and you have a little bit more, I don't know, but it really is very informative.
Yeah, well, those are very well defined degrees and so forth. Like in the Church of Satan, you will see that the degree system is more something that's more of a matter of intuition or feeling and so forth, without so much strict criteria. And there are only 5 degrees there.
Yes. Yeah. But it's really interesting to see how you kind of do even the Sethian magical theory and technology, black magic and theory and practice. I thought, all right, he could actually write a book just on this.
Sure. There is one. You have to be a member of the church of the Temple of Set to read it.
Oh, there is. I didn't know that.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. But it's really. We don't have time to talk about all of this. You have the practice of lesser black magic. I mean, you have all of these wonderful and very interesting subjects that you go and you talk really profoundly about. I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about. But this is just a very informative and very accurate, I think, in my opinion, and also very fascinating book. Not only the subject is very fascinating, also because everybody wants to, to see a little bit more about all of these very dark, as they call it, paths. So it's always very popular, right?
Right.
It's always very popular.
I was at back in the middle of the Satanic Scare. I was Mike Laquino and his wife Lilith came down here to Texas and went to a place where we were had these sheriffs and things like that, investigating satanic crime, and they were all asking him questions and to me and all that kind of thing. And they would say, well, you people are really not evil. You're more like scientists, it seems. And they were just like baffled by the whole thing. He says, well, there you go. They're starting to get it now. That there's that.
There is a profound philosophy. There is a profound.
Yes.
This
it's
is
just
not
that
just.
It says, well, we're not going to fear. That we refuse to fear the darkness, or even the dark imagery, etc. And that people who are, the worship conformity to the mass, that's who we oppose, because each individual, and this is, I think, a true fact, that each individual human being has their own religion. I'm a linguist. I've studied language and I've studied linguistics, and one of the great professors I studied under pointed out to me that no two people have the same language. If you're a native English speaker, a Spanish speaker, whatever, you really have your own grammar. There's variations in it, vocabulary differences. Every individual human being has their own language. It's only the degree to which we can share with others within a certain group that we say, well, I can understand him and he can understand me. But really, we have differences between and among ourselves, which distinguish ourselves even in language, much less in something as refined as religion or spiritual conceptions. We have individual differences. It's a matter of absolute fact. You can't make the same sound twice exactly the same.
Yeah.
He repeatedly, if you think you're doing like puh, puh, puh each time, actually, objectively, they're different each time. And so these differences, the idea that we are different one from the other, and that we don't lament that, but we celebrate that, or we at least understand that, is a step in the direction not of what I don't like the word tolerance. I like the word respect. Because
Absolutely.
you tolerate a headache.
Yes.
You can
Yeah.
respect a friend.
Yes. Yeah.
You see,
And,
like
yeah. Yeah.
so that they're the people or things, ideas or humans or whatever of quality, of worth, etc. We can respect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
And you know,
that's
I
what it
think
was.
that with this book and with this new face of the book, the cover, it would certainly be appealing to people. We're showing now the cover of Inner Traditions. Inner Traditions, thank you so much again for giving us this wonderful book to read and to review. It's very good. Lords of the Left-Hand Path, The Forbidden Practice in Spiritual Heresies, From the Cult of Set to the Church of Satan, by Dr. Stephen Flowers. Now, there's an early version. Here it is, the cover of the early version. We actually discuss a little bit of this rune in the cover. Dr. Flowers actually told us what it was in the beginning, so just skip on to the beginning and you will know what it is that we're talking about. I'm just very... I would love to have you again in the show.
Oh, well, great. I have another couple of books coming out with Inner Traditions. One on the coming up right away. But the one is on Sufi practices.
Yes.
That written by the Baron Rudolf von Schwattendorf, who is the founder of the Thule Society in Germany, and then another one on more titillating than the last. Is about it's called Carnal Alchemy, and it's about sadomasochistic spiritual practices.
Oh,
if that doesn't get you excited, well,
I know, I know, right?
Then I'm sorry, but anyway, so I have those two coming out.
That's great.
And then also, I just want to point out that one of the previous high priests of the Temple of Set, former named Don Webb, he has a book coming out. Will be coming out on Aleister Crowley with Inner Traditions in the future, and you can get books by him and by me and so forth from our website at www.runaraven.com. Where we have, many books there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to have you back for all of those books, but I do want you to come back because I want to do a special on the Temple of Set. And I really do want to go a little bit, into what it is and all of that, so that we can inform a little bit about, and we talked about it, and we talked about Michael, but I really wanted to go a little bit more in depth on what it is, and and all of that, so that I think that it's very interesting, and because you're associated with it, it would be a little bit more easy to have a perspective from the inside than I would love to do a show with you about that, and it would be wonderful if you would love to, if you would wanted to. To do that.
Fine. Yeah, great.
Yeah, that would be great. So we will be waiting for these books of
Yeah.
the Inner Traditions, and I have contacts in high places on Inner Traditions.
Great.
So we will get
It's
them.
always a good thing to have.
Yes, we will get them, and we will follow you very, very closely, and also the other author. So we will have you again on Witch Talk, talking about the Temple of Seth and the special, and also about your books. Well, thank you so much for being on Witch Talk.
Well, thank you, Kevin.
It was wonderful
Thanks so
to
much.
talk to you. Thank you so much. And so don't go anywhere. Don't hang up. I will just finishing the show, and then I will talk to you in a little bit. All right?
Great.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Flowers, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's it. This is the end of Witch Talk show, this show today. We will be right back next week with more Witch Talk for you. Until then, have a wonderful, Bye.